yeah, being young.
Welcome to Twenty-Allthings. This is a web project dedicated to people in their 20s. For today's episode, we have the honor and pleasure of having someone that I know dearly, and I think this is a person and leader of grit. Please welcome Queen Quiocho.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Kevin.
Yeah, well, Queen, we've known each other for a while now. I think it's been more than a year for sure.
A little over a year, yes.
Yes, and for this web project, fun fact, we're filming this in the end of April, and this marks the second anniversary of Twenty-Allthings.
Oh, fun.
Yes, it is an exciting time.
Congratulations to you on that, yeah.
And, I think that for this episode, it'd be great to commemorate that with having you on the project. As I mentioned, you are a woman of grit, and I think that when I was thinking of interesting conversations, I thought about this topic of how to have difficult conversations in your 20s or how to navigate that. And the reason why I brought you on the project, because I think that we've had multiple conversations about multiple things, and you've coached me and mentored me through a lot of them. Yeah. And I think I love how you are definitely forward, but still forward with love, and not necessarily confrontational in a bad way, but in a healthy way in that perspective. So before we begin and dive into that topic, can you let us know, whether they're listening or watching, more about yourself?
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Like Kevin said, my name is Queen, and what about me do you need to know? Okay, so I am a Sunnyvale native. I love the city of Sunnyvale. I just moved out here with my family a little over 2 years ago, maybe almost 2 years. And so it's a fun community-based city. We love it here. We are campus pastors at the Sunnyvale campus of Echo Church. I love outdoor stuff. I love movies. I love going to the movies. We've got 2 kids. Every now and then I'll take my younger one walking. My oldest, not so much, because she's a teenager. She's not interested in all of those things. But we love people. It's one thing you'll learn about me. I love people. I love connecting with people, getting to know people. I love good food. Sunnyvale is all about that. You should come visit Sunnyvale if you're not in Sunnyvale. But
there you go.
It's a little bit about me. Hopefully it's good enough.
No, totally. I mean, that's great. And of course, that's where we're filming all of this, in Sunnyvale, California.
Yes.
It's great to be here. And so let's now talk about difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And for you, what does that particularly mean? What does it mean for conversation to be difficult?
A difficult conversation to me is something that is on your heart that you want to have with someone, but sometimes the barrier could be, what makes it difficult, I would say, is will the other person receive it in the way I'm going to dish it, in a sense, or how I'll explain it? Or am I even confident enough to hold this conversation with someone? So it could be something that's troubling you, a challenge, or something you didn't like someone did, but sometimes we can internalize it and keep it inside and think, I'll get over it myself. But oftentimes it's good to have the conversation with someone. But what would make it made it feel difficult is, can I deliver as I feel, or can that person receive it in the best way that I'm trying to communicate? So that could make it difficult, because sometimes you can just say something and then the person hears it, and then you think you've nailed the conversation, and they've left more confused. And it wasn't really a successful, difficult conversation. Or it could feel tense. The conversation can go another way, where you're explaining something, and then the person hears something else, and you're like, oh, it's getting more and more difficult. So it's just a dialogue that could be hard to have if you don't know how to deliver it, or you don't feel confident in how the person will receive it. That's kind of what I feel.
Yeah, well, that's pretty interesting. I think that it's very relevant, because whether someone is in their 20s or whatever age, that there's always going to be a point in time where someone has to go through a difficult conversation and try to make it as clear and concise, and definitely not make it confusing coming out of that conversation. Yeah. So this is the project for Twenty-Allthings for people in their 20s. So for you in your 20s, how was it navigating difficult conversations? Oh
gosh, in my 20s, I was so terrified to even talk to people. At this point in my life, I love having difficult conversations. And I don't mean I love it it's fun to have, is that I don't mind it. I think it's great. But in my 20s, I used to worry so much about how I sounded, or can I say what I really want to say, or am I too much in feeling those things? But one of my mentors helped me, and she would always have me do role plays. And so if I wanted to have a conversation with you, something that happened and I didn't like the way you said something, I would role play with someone else before I came and talked to you. So I would just imagine I'm talking to Kevin. Okay, Kevin, here's what happened and here's how I feel. And I would practice so that it gives me some boost of confidence so that when I'm sitting with you, I can actually have the conversation.
Yeah.
And it helps me hear my voice, because first it was a little shaky because I'm like, I don't know, do you want to say it? Do you want to say what you really need to say? And you don't want to, and it takes you to a place of transparency and vulnerability, and you feel, do I want people to see the side of me that is like, I'm just, I'm super sensitive or whatever, but it's important to have. So I think a mentor helping me practice and doing a lot of role play is really great. And I still do that even now. I will still practice my conversation before I have the conversation. And one thing I did in the 20s, my mentor helped me too, was I would think of different scenarios. So I would think to myself, okay, if the conversation goes this way, how would I respond? If it goes that way, how would I respond? So I never went into a conversation with one answer. I always had all these edges, like just in case, because I want to have an end to the conversation as well. Because when you have them, you want it to be the last conversation, good or bad, but mostly good. You don't want to have another meeting after the meeting. You want to be able to finish it. So what helps is that role playing. Also, carving out the right time based on the person you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody who is a little bit more maybe emotional, or this is going to go a lot more emotional, maybe create time for it so that they don't feel like you're rushing them, because they're going to get emotional. So an hour may not be enough, maybe 2. And that's okay, because you needed to have that conversation. Is not just for you. It's also for them they can say whatever they need to say as well. So it doesn't feel like a monologue, you know what I mean? So having a role play and having good timing helps. Yeah.
Well, those are really helpful tips.
I still do those, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've learned that like in your 20s, and it still applies to you to this very day.
Yeah.
And so, can you give whatever you're comfortable sharing, like an example of that, like a difficult conversation, if that's okay? Oh
gosh, one that comes to mind right now. This one's it's a little personal, and I wouldn't say names, but I used to be, I have a friend who at this time, she had really bad breath. Okay, if I could say that.
Yeah.
It was really bad breath. And what happened was, people would just talk about it and say, oh man, she's got bad breath, she's got bad breath. And in my mind, I'm like, someone's got to tell her, because some things you just don't know. Or maybe she knew and didn't know how to get out of it. So that's a very difficult one to have.
Yeah.
Even till this day, that's never an easy one to have with someone.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I thought to myself, okay, I need to figure out how to go in, and I was the closest to her. So I'm like, it's gotta be me. And everyone would tell me you should do it. So this is what I did. I sat down with her and I said, okay, maybe she doesn't have a dental plan. Maybe that's it. She doesn't have a dental plan. I'll take that angle. And I thought, I'll have that conversation. If she says she doesn't, then I will make suggestions. But what if she says she does? You have to think of a few different angles, right?
Yeah.
If she says she does, okay, then I would say, well, do you visit the dentist often? So I had the conversation with her and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, this is getting around, and I hate for you to have this, it was an impression I used, have this resume is what I used. I said, you don't want to have this resume about yourself, It's an impression. People think of you when you come around. They don't want you to talk because they think, oh gosh, there goes the bad breath. And I said, okay, do you have a dental plan?
Yeah.
And she goes, oh my gosh, something I've been struggling with for a long time. I said, okay. Because you feel like you don't have to be the one that's bearing the bad news, but she felt it. So she said she didn't have a dental plan. So that took me to that angle of, okay, well, let me help you with that. Because here's what's going to happen. If you don't take care of this now, it's going to get bad. You may have gum disease, you don't know it. But the truth of the matter is there is bad breath whenever we're having conversation.
Yeah.
And so I helped her. It took like 6 months. I mean, that was hard. After the conversation, I was like, oh my gosh, I finally said it. Because I also knew she did, but it's hard to say that to someone, So she finally got a dental plan. And I said, okay, now the next step is actually visiting a dentist often. And it's not just for that 1 year checkup, but you've got to go because they may find things that you need. And so I have to say today, she doesn't have bad breath.
That's great to hear.
She visits the dentist often, but that was a difficult one. That's the first one that came to mind. So hopefully, I mean, you may have a friend out there who's got, bad body odor, or maybe it's like bad breath or something, but those are hard to have because you feel like you're intruding in someone's space. But if you love them, you've got to be able to have those conversations. Yeah.
Well, wow,
That's a deep one.
no, it's a really good example. I think that people don't realize how often that is common for them to like navigate that situation. Definitely want to understand. One thing that you mentioned was a lot of people went up to you and said, Queen, you should be the one talking to them. So I think that's interesting. And I wanted to ask, like, at what point is it a good time to be the one to have a difficult conversation? And when is it a time to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to refer someone else to do that difficult conversation on behalf of everyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a relationship thing. So if you are close to a person, I think when people say that to anyone, me, in this case, it was me because I was the closest to her. So they felt like she would receive it better from me. But when you have a good relationship with somebody, you have equity there. So you can have these conversations, you know? But if you don't have that equity in relationship, it could be tough because it'll sound crazy coming from someone who you don't know, telling you, hey, excuse me, you have bad breath. Or, you know, it's like, I need you to fix your attitude a little bit, or you need to be a little bit nicer. But you can only say something like that to someone who you can't. They will receive it best from you because you have a relationship with them. So I think me being that point of contact is because I had a better relationship with the young lady. But in anything, you know, whether it's also at work or whether it's, you know, leisure or friendships you're having with people, if you don't have a good relationship with somebody, it's hard to engage that way because you don't want it to feel like a meeting. You don't want it to feel like, oh, it's a transactional conversation. You want it to feel like, hey, I care for you. Something I say to people when I have difficult conversations, I'll say, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't do this. Because that just levels the plane and it makes them know, okay, because I care for you, I'm having this conversation. So in moments where I've had to terminate someone or I've had to move somebody to another position or whatever the case is, I'll say, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't be here. I don't want you to have this impression of yourself. I've said this when we used to lead an internship program in one of our areas of ministry that we've been in. And people, some of our young ladies will dress a little bit inappropriate. It's like, and I would say, is this an impression you want to leave of yourself? Do you want people to think about you this way? And I could say that because I had a relationship with them, so I could do it. So I think that's really what closes the gap is the equity in relationship. So I don't mind it. But if I don't have a relationship with that person, I'll find someone who does because they can receive it better.
Yeah.
Because they know the person cares for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I think that the concept of really coming from a place of we have this relationship and that's the reason why with your care, I'm bringing up this topic or this conversation.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, as we reach the end of this episode, like any last thoughts on, you know, your advice for people watching or listening in their 20s? What are other helpful tips?
I think what I would suggest, one thing I didn't do very well in my 20s, and I think I'm redeeming the time now in my 40s. I'm in my 40s now. Is that I didn't spend a lot of relational time with people in my 20s, so that when I had to have those difficult conversations, they weren't so difficult. After all, it was just a normal conversation, you know. I think also, so if you're in your 20s right now, you try not to have surfacey relationships or superficial ones. You want them to be deep and meaningful, so that if you ever have to, you could. It's when you see somebody mistreating someone, you can say to that person, hey, don't do that. Instead of going, hey, can you tell that person not to do that? Because you have equity. I would say that is one thing that I wish I did better, in my 20s, spend more time with people so that I can so those conversations we call difficult could just be normal.
Yeah.
And you can have them in a normal time frame. So yeah, that's a lesson I'm learning now.
Yeah. Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
I think that it really, normalizes as you build a relationship with a person, through friendship or whatever type of relationship, it really is centered around, continue to communicate.
Yeah.
And then so when it reaches a point of a difficult conversation as we're describing or tagging, it is, like what you said, it's just normal because you've just been providing feedback to one another naturally.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is right. Feedback is what's really important. The more you have feedback on a consistent basis, and you even receive feedback, and you allow people to do that with you, you can bounce off and share and receive. It helps you a lot to have those conversations. It helps you not to, back out or back into the wall when it comes to having those. make them as normal as possible, and be confident in your voice, what you sound like. And practice a lot with people. Find a person who you feel like, hey, can I practice with you? I know this is going to sound weird. It feels weird. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so when you're with that person, you can just nail it and get it done. But do it with love and with care. Of course.
Definitely. And I know I really, really appreciate you being on this episode. And also, I appreciate every time that you had a conversation with me. Yeah. Because I've learned.
Hope they weren't too difficult.
No, they weren't too difficult. I think ultimately, I think it takes it from my perspective. I appreciate you and you've coached me through multiple phases of my life. And now I think I've come out of those conversations as a better person.
Well, I'm glad. It's fun to have, and I receive it too. So he does the same. You guys don't listen to him.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're really so thankful for you.
Of course.
And for those of you watching, thank you so much for tuning in. We are on YouTube. For those of you who want to watch the video version, and for those of you who want the audio version, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening or watching, and we hope that you have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Look. Yeah, I'm young, but I'm hungry. Here to learn, I won't let you take it from me. Grown talk, yeah, I'm talking 20-something. I don't know about much, but know one thing. I'm only good at being young.